Most people spend their lives waiting for a feeling that never comes. They believe that discipline begins the moment they feel motivated, confident, or inspired. They imagine a future version of themselves who wakes up early without effort, works without resistance, and chooses what is hard without hesitation. That imagined version feels powerful, organized, and in control. And so they wait for that version to arrive. Days pass, then months, then years. The feeling never comes, and life quietly stays the same. This is where the misunderstanding begins. Discipline does not start with motivation. In fact, motivation is often what keeps people stuck. Motivation is emotional, temporary, and dependent on mood. Discipline is structural. It exists even when motivation is absent. The book opens by confronting this illusion directly. If you wait to feel ready, you will never act. Discipline begins the moment you act despite not feeling ready. The author explains that resistance is not a personal flaw. It is a biological response. The human brain is designed to conserve energy and avoid discomfort. Any action that threatens comfort, routine, or certainty triggers internal pushback. This is why starting is always harder than continuing. The mind prefers what is familiar, even when what is familiar is harmful. Discipline, then, is not about forcing yourself into pain. It is about learning how to move forward while resistance is present. What most people misunderstand is that discipline does not feel good at first. It does not come with clarity or confidence. It comes with uncertainty, doubt, and a quiet sense of friction. The author emphasizes that the first step toward discipline is not enthusiasm, but acceptance. Acceptance that you will not feel like doing what needs to be done. Acceptance that discomfort is not a sign of failure, but a signal that you are doing something different from your past. The book introduces a crucial shift in perspective. Discipline is not something you have, it is something you practice. No one is born disciplined. People become disciplined through repetition. Small decisions, repeated consistently, begin to reshape identity. The author stresses that identity is not formed by goals but by actions. You do not become disciplined and then act. You act, and discipline follows. At the core of this process is consistency, not intensity. Many people try to change their lives through dramatic bursts of effort. They overhaul routines, set unrealistic expectations, and push themselves aggressively. This approach fails because it relies on emotional momentum. When that momentum fades, the system collapses. Discipline built this way is fragile. The book argues instead for something far quieter, small, repeatable actions that can survive low energy, bad moods, and imperfect days. The author explains that the mind is always watching behavior. Every action sends a message about who you are. When you skip a task, even a small one, the mind registers avoidance. When you follow through, even imperfectly, the mind registers reliability. Over time, these signals accumulate. Discipline is simply the identity that emerges when reliability becomes consistent. Another key idea introduced early is the separation between intention and execution. Most people are full of intention. They want to be better, healthier, more productive, more focused. Intention feels productive because it creates the illusion of progress. Execution, however, requires discomfort. The book makes it clear that intention without execution slowly erodes self-trust. Each time you promise yourself something and fail to follow through, confidence weakens. Discipline restores confidence not through thinking, but through evidence. The author also addresses procrastination, not as laziness but as emotional avoidance. Procrastination is the habit of choosing short-term comfort over long-term benefit. It is rarely about the task itself. It is about the feelings associated with the task: fear of failure, fear of inadequacy, or fear of effort. Discipline does not eliminate these feelings. It teaches you to act without negotiating with them. A powerful concept introduced in this part is the idea of removing decision-making. The more you debate whether to act, the more likely you are to avoid action. Discipline simplifies life by reducing internal negotiation. When something becomes a rule instead of a choice, resistance decreases. The author emphasizes that disciplined people are not stronger, they simply argue less with themselves. The book also highlights that discipline is built in ordinary moments, not heroic ones. Waking up on time when no one is watching, completing a task when the reward is delayed, saying no to distractions that offer immediate gratification. These moments feel insignificant individually, but collectively they define character. Most people underestimate how much their daily choices shape their future. Another important idea explored is the role of environment. Discipline is not just internal, it is external. Your surroundings either support discipline or sabotage it. The author explains that relying purely on willpower is ineffective. Willpower is limited and inconsistent. Structuring your environment to reduce friction makes discipline sustainable. This includes removing distractions, simplifying routines, and making desired actions easier to start. The book makes it clear that discipline is not about perfection. Missed days will happen. Failure will happen. What matters is not avoiding failure, but returning quickly. Disciplined people are not those who never fail, but those who do not let failure become identity. They resume action without drama, guilt, or self-punishment. Toward the end of this section, the author reframes discipline as self-respect. Following through is not about productivity or achievement alone. It is about trust. When you keep commitments to yourself, even small ones, you reinforce the belief that you are reliable. That belief changes how you approach everything else in life. The first part closes with a grounding truth. Discipline is not built by waiting for a better version of yourself to arrive. It is built by showing up as you are, imperfect and uncertain, and acting anyway. Motivation may come later, or it may not come at all. Discipline does not depend on it. Discipline depends on action, repeated often enough that resistance loses its authority. The moment you commit to doing something consistently, a quiet conflict begins. It does not announce itself loudly. There are no alarms or dramatic confrontations. Instead, it shows up as hesitation, distraction, and delay. You sit down to work and feel an inexplicable urge to check something trivial. You plan to wake up early and suddenly find reasons to stay in bed. You decide to exercise and your mind starts negotiating, offering excuses that sound reasonable in the moment. This is not a failure of character, it is resistance. The book makes it clear that resistance is not something to be eliminated. It is something to be understood. Resistance appears whenever you attempt to move from who you are now to who you are trying to become. It is the friction between an old identity and a new one. The old identity prefers familiarity. It knows how to survive within its current limits. The new identity demands change, effort, and uncertainty. Resistance exists to protect the old identity from being challenged. Most people misunderstand resistance because they interpret it emotionally. They assume that feeling resistance means something is wrong. They believe that if a path is correct, it should feel natural or exciting. The author dismantles this assumption. Resistance does not indicate the wrong direction. In many cases, it indicates the right one. The more meaningful the change, the stronger the resistance. Discipline is not the absence of resistance. It is the ability to move forward while resistance is present. At the center of this struggle is identity. The book emphasizes that discipline fails when it is treated as a temporary behavior rather than an identity shift. People often say they are trying to be disciplined, but trying implies uncertainty. It suggests that discipline is optional, conditional, and negotiable. Identity, on the other hand, is stable. When behavior aligns with identity, resistance weakens because the action feels consistent with who you believe you are. The author explains that identity is built through evidence, not intention. Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you are becoming. When you skip what you plan to do, you are not just skipping a task. You are reinforcing the identity of someone who avoids discomfort. When you follow through, even imperfectly, you reinforce the identity of someone who keeps commitments. Over time, these votes accumulate. Identity solidifies not through dramatic change, but through repetition. This is why discipline must be approached from the smallest possible scale. The book strongly argues against relying on motivation or grand goals to carry you forward. Large goals create pressure. Pressure invites resistance. Small, repeatable actions reduce resistance by lowering the psychological cost of starting. When an action feels manageable, the mind is less likely to sabotage it. Discipline grows quietly when the barrier to action is low enough that excuses lose their power. The author introduces an important distinction between discomfort and harm. Many people avoid disciplined action because they associate discomfort with danger. The brain interprets effort as a threat because it disrupts equilibrium. But discomfort is not harmful. It is a signal of adaptation. Discipline trains you to reinterpret discomfort not as something to escape, but as something to move through. This reinterpretation changes behavior more effectively than force ever could. Another central idea in this part of the book is the role of self-talk. The way you interpret resistance determines whether it controls you. When resistance appears, most people personalize it. They think, "I'm lazy," or "I don't have what it takes." These interpretations deepen the struggle because they turn a temporary feeling into a permanent judgment. The author encourages a different approach. Observe resistance without identifying with it. Resistance is something you experience, not something you are. This perspective allows you to act without waiting for resistance to disappear. Instead of asking, "Do I feel like doing this?" the disciplined response becomes, "This is what I do." The question shifts from emotion to identity. When behavior is identity-driven, it requires less emotional energy. You stop debating with yourself because the decision has already been made at a higher level. The book also highlights that discipline often feels lonely, especially at first. When you change your behavior, you separate yourself from your previous patterns, and sometimes from people who share those patterns. This can create discomfort that feels social rather than personal. The author explains that discipline requires the willingness to tolerate temporary isolation, not because discipline demands withdrawal from others, but because growth often precedes understanding. Another form of resistance discussed is perfectionism. Many people delay action because they want conditions to be ideal. They wait for the right time, the right plan, or the right mood. Perfectionism disguises itself as high standards, but it often functions as avoidance. The book makes it clear that discipline does not require optimal conditions. It requires movement. Imperfect action taken consistently produces far better results than perfect action taken rarely. The author introduces the idea that discipline is built by finishing, not by starting. Starting feels exciting. Finishing feels demanding. Many people accumulate half-finished projects and broken routines, which slowly erode confidence. Discipline restores confidence by creating closure. Completing even small tasks sends a powerful signal to the mind. You follow through. That signal is more important than the scale of the task itself. A crucial theme in this part is emotional neutrality. Disciplined people do not attach excessive emotion to their habits. They do not dramatize success or failure. They treat action as routine. This emotional neutrality prevents burnout and inconsistency. When every task becomes an emotional event, discipline becomes exhausting. When tasks become normal, discipline becomes sustainable. The book also addresses the temptation to compare yourself to others. Comparison creates unrealistic expectations and unnecessary pressure. Discipline is deeply personal. What looks easy for someone else may be extremely difficult for you, and vice versa. The author emphasizes that discipline should be measured against your own standards, not external ones. Progress matters more than speed. Another important idea introduced is the concept of delayed gratification. Discipline is fundamentally about choosing future benefits over present comfort. This choice becomes easier when future benefits feel real. The author explains that many people fail at discipline because they cannot emotionally connect with their future self. They treat future consequences as abstract. Discipline strengthens when you begin to view your future self as someone you are responsible for, not someone separate from you. The book also highlights that discipline is fragile in the beginning. Early habits are easy to break because they have not yet accumulated enough evidence to support identity. This is why consistency matters more than intensity. Missing one day is not catastrophic, but missing many days in a row resets the process. The author emphasizes returning quickly rather than perfectly. Speed of recovery matters more than avoidance of failure. One of the more subtle but powerful ideas in this section is that discipline simplifies decision-making. When you decide in advance what you will do, you reduce the mental load of choice. Decision fatigue is one of the biggest enemies of discipline. The more decisions you make throughout the day, the weaker your resolve becomes. Structured routines protect discipline by reducing unnecessary choices. The author also explains that discipline must be protected from overcomplication. Many people try to optimize their routines endlessly. They adjust, tweak, and redesign constantly. While reflection is important, excessive optimization can become another form of avoidance. Discipline thrives in stability. Once a routine works, it should be protected rather than endlessly improved. Toward the end of this part, the author reframes discipline as an act of honesty. When you commit to something and follow through, you align your actions with your intentions. This alignment reduces internal conflict. Much of the stress people experience comes from living inconsistently with their stated values. Discipline reduces this stress by closing the gap between what you say and what you do. The section concludes with a grounding realization. The battle for discipline is not loud or dramatic. It is fought quietly, every day in small moments that no one else sees. Choosing to act when it would be easier not to. Choosing consistency over comfort. Choosing identity over impulse. Discipline is not built by winning once. It is built by showing up repeatedly, especially on ordinary days when there is no excitement to carry you forward. Once discipline begins to take root, a new challenge emerges: focus. Many people assume focus is a talent, something you either have or you don't. They believe disciplined people can concentrate effortlessly, while everyone else struggles with distraction. The book dismantles this myth quickly. Focus is not a gift. It is a byproduct of structure. It improves not because you force your attention, but because you remove the conditions that constantly pull it away. The author explains that modern life trains distraction. Endless options, constant notifications, and immediate gratification condition the mind to seek novelty. This makes sustained effort feel uncomfortable. Discipline restores focus by narrowing attention. Instead of trying to do more, disciplined people decide to do less, but to do it fully. Focus improves when decisions are simplified and priorities are clear. A major reason people lose focus is emotional overload. When tasks feel overwhelming, the mind looks for escape. Distraction becomes a coping mechanism. The book emphasizes breaking work into clearly defined, manageable units. When the next action is obvious and small, resistance decreases. Focus is not about willpower. It is about clarity. Confusion invites distraction. Clarity invites action. The author introduces the idea that consistency matters more than duration. Many people try to focus intensely for long periods and fail. They burn out, lose momentum, and abandon the habit altogether. Discipline favors shorter, repeatable periods of focused effort. These periods build trust with yourself. When you consistently show up, even briefly, focus strengthens naturally. Another important theme is protecting attention. Focus does not happen by accident. It must be defended. The author explains that disciplined people are deliberate about what they allow into their environment. They reduce noise, eliminate unnecessary inputs, and design spaces that support concentration. This is not about isolation. It is about intentional boundaries. Focus grows when distractions are removed before they compete for attention. The book also addresses the misconception that multitasking increases productivity. In reality, multitasking fragments attention and weakens discipline. Switching tasks frequently creates the illusion of busyness while reducing effectiveness. Disciplined focus requires committing to one task at a time and completing it before moving on. This single-task approach trains the mind to tolerate boredom and resist impulsive switching. Consistency is where most people fail, not because they lack desire, but because they underestimate its psychological demands. Consistency requires repetition without novelty. It requires doing the same thing even when it feels dull. The author emphasizes that boredom is not an obstacle to discipline. It is part of the process. Learning to work through boredom builds resilience. Avoiding boredom keeps you dependent on stimulation. The book explains that consistency reshapes identity faster than intensity. Intense efforts produce emotional highs but rarely last. Consistent effort produces quiet confidence. Over time, consistency removes the need for motivation. You no longer ask whether you should act. You act because it is what you do. This shift marks a turning point in discipline. Another critical idea explored is the concept of finishing what you start. Many people associate productivity with starting new projects. Starting feels exciting and hopeful. Finishing requires patience and tolerance for diminishing returns. Discipline strengthens when you complete tasks, even when enthusiasm fades. Completion builds closure, and closure builds self-trust. The author explains that focus and consistency work together. Focus makes effort effective. Consistency makes effort reliable. Without focus, consistency becomes busy work. Without consistency, focus becomes occasional and unstable. Discipline emerges when both are present. This balance takes time to develop, but it becomes self-reinforcing once established. The book also discusses the role of routine. Routine is often misunderstood as rigid or restrictive. In reality, routine creates freedom by reducing decision fatigue. When certain actions happen automatically, mental energy is preserved for more important choices. Disciplined routines are flexible in structure but firm in commitment. They adapt without collapsing. Another obstacle to focus is emotional distraction. Stress, frustration, and self-criticism pull attention inward. The author explains that disciplined people learn to notice emotional noise without letting it dictate behavior. They do not wait for emotions to settle before acting. They act despite emotional turbulence. Over time, action reduces emotional intensity rather than the other way around. The book highlights that focus improves when goals are meaningful. Meaning sustains attention. When you understand why something matters, resistance weakens. Discipline is easier when effort aligns with values rather than external pressure. This alignment transforms discipline from obligation into responsibility. The author also addresses fatigue. Discipline does not ignore limits. Physical exhaustion undermines focus. Sleep, nutrition, and recovery are not optional. They are foundational. Many people fail at discipline because they neglect basic maintenance. Sustainable discipline respects the body rather than fighting it. A powerful idea in this section is that disciplined people plan for failure. They anticipate days when focus will be low and energy will be limited. Instead of abandoning the habit entirely, they reduce the minimum requirement. This prevents all-or-nothing thinking. Consistency survives because expectations are flexible, not rigid. The book explains that distraction often returns when progress slows. Early results create excitement. Later stages feel repetitive. This is where most people quit. Disciplined people continue anyway. They understand that growth is not linear. Plateaus are part of the process, not signs of failure. The author emphasizes that discipline matures over time. Early discipline feels forced. Later discipline feels natural. Eventually, discipline becomes invisible. It no longer feels like effort. It feels like identity. This transformation does not happen quickly, but it happens reliably when consistency is maintained. Toward the end of this part, the author reframes focus as an act of respect. When you give your full attention to a task, you honor your commitment. When you scatter attention, you dilute effort. Focus is not just about productivity, it is about integrity. It reflects how seriously you take your own intentions. The section closes with a quiet realization. Discipline is no longer about forcing yourself to act. It is about becoming someone who follows through. Focus sharpens that identity. consistency reinforces it. Over time, discipline stops feeling like something you do and starts feeling like something you are. By the time discipline becomes familiar, something unexpected happens. What once felt restrictive begins to feel liberating. The routines that initially required effort start to remove friction from daily life. Decisions become simpler. Internal conflict quiets. The mind feels less crowded. The book reframes discipline not as a system of control, but as a path to freedom. Freedom from impulse, from regret, and from the exhausting cycle of starting over. Most people associate freedom with choice. They believe that having more options means being more free. In reality, endless choice often creates paralysis. When everything is optional, nothing is stable. Discipline limits choices in advance so that energy is preserved for what matters. By deciding once and acting many times, disciplined people reduce mental noise. This reduction is not deprivation, it is relief. The author emphasizes that self-trust is the real currency discipline builds. Confidence does not come from talent or praise, it comes from evidence. Every time you do what you said you would do, you deposit trust into your relationship with yourself. Over time, this trust changes how you approach challenges. You no longer rely on motivation or mood. You rely on your history of follow-through. This self-trust alters the way you experience stress. When challenges arise, disciplined individuals are less reactive. They have practiced showing up when it would have been easier not to. This practice builds emotional resilience. Stress does not disappear, but it becomes manageable. You stop panicking because you trust your ability to respond consistently. Another important shift described in the book is the movement from external validation to internal standards. Early in the process, many people use discipline to prove something, to others or to themselves. Over time, the need for validation fades. Discipline becomes private, quiet, almost invisible. You act not because someone is watching, but because it aligns with who you are. The author also addresses the idea of balance. Discipline is often misunderstood as rigidity. In reality, mature discipline is flexible. It adapts without collapsing. Rigid systems break under pressure. Flexible systems bend and recover. Discipline allows adjustment without abandonment. You may change methods, timing, or intensity, but you do not abandon the commitment itself. A critical theme in this final part is sustainability. Discipline that cannot be sustained eventually becomes self-defeating. The author emphasizes designing systems that fit your real life, not an idealized version of it. Sustainable discipline respects energy limits, life disruptions, and changing priorities. It survives because it is realistic. The book also reframes failure. Failure is no longer a moral judgment. It is information. Disciplined people do not spiral after setbacks. They analyze, adjust, and continue. What matters is not avoiding mistakes, but refusing to let mistakes redefine identity. The speed at which you return to action matters more than the absence of disruption. Another subtle but powerful idea introduced here is that discipline creates momentum across areas of life. When you are disciplined in one domain, the identity carries over. Follow-through becomes a default behavior. You begin to expect consistency from yourself, and that expectation influences choices automatically. The author explains that discipline also improves emotional regulation. When you act consistently, emotions stop controlling behavior. You learn that feelings are temporary signals, not commands. This separation reduces impulsive decisions and regret. Over time, you stop reacting and start responding. Discipline also simplifies goals. As identity stabilizes, you stop chasing scattered ambitions. You become clearer about what matters. Discipline sharpens priorities because it forces trade-offs. You cannot do everything, so you choose deliberately. This clarity reduces anxiety and increases satisfaction. The book emphasizes that disciplined living is not about productivity alone. It is about alignment. When your actions align with your values, life feels coherent. Many people experience exhaustion not from effort, but from inconsistency. Discipline reduces this internal friction. The author also highlights that discipline creates time, not by adding hours but by eliminating waste. Less procrastination, fewer restarts, fewer emotional detours. Time feels more spacious because energy is not scattered. This creates the freedom to invest in relationships, creativity, and rest without guilt. As discipline matures, it becomes less visible even to you. You no longer label actions as disciplined. You simply do them. The effort that once felt heavy now feels normal. This normalization is the goal. Discipline succeeds when it disappears into identity. Toward the end, the author addresses meaning. Discipline without meaning becomes hollow. Discipline with meaning becomes grounding. Meaning does not need to be dramatic. It comes from honoring commitments, contributing reliably, and building a life you respect. Discipline supports meaning by turning intention into reality. The final insight is quiet but profound. Discipline is not about becoming someone else. It is about becoming consistent with yourself. It is about closing the gap between who you want to be and how you behave. When that gap closes, peace follows. The book ends where it began, with action. Not grand declarations or final motivation, but the simple instruction to keep showing up. Discipline is never finished. It is practiced. And in that practice, freedom is built, not all at once, but day by day, choice by choice.